What do you think about woke culture? It's what everyone's talking about.
I think it's a bunch of crap. They're trying to change what our children think in the schools.
What would you like to see happen?
I'd like to get back like it was in the 60s.
This is a perfect example of a Republican telling on themselves for being racist while also not realizing that they're being racist.
Before all the civil rights stuff?
Before all the civil rights stuff.
So you would like to see things go back to before the civil rights movement?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You know, where people have their freedom in this country.
Well, certain groups didn't have as much at the time, right?
Right. They didn't have as much at the time. But we still got to get back where this country stands up for this country.
Getting back to this country stands up for this country is code for, white people being on top. We're going to take our country back. You get it.
Hey, you look at the in this country, what do they want? They want people to come from Africa. The Mexicans want people, they stick up for their own kind. The Mexicans want more Mexicans here. It's that way.
There's all black colleges, there's all black churches, and nobody complains. But if whites have all white college, all white church, they're racist.
I think it comes from a history of the fact that they had to, because of segregation, they had to establish their own schools and churches. Yeah, African Americans.
Well, that's true. And everybody got along good back then.
Sorry, say that again. Just
the segregation, everybody got along good.
What is with these crusty old white people thinking that social unrest is like this new age concept and definitely wasn't around in the 50s or definitely not the 1960s?
All the world today knows that we are here and we are standing before the forces of power in the state of Alabama saying we ain't gonna let nobody turn us around.
And then, of course, you have politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying things like this.
I know a ton of white people that are as lazy and sorry and probably worse than black people I know.
It's a remarkably useful tool by right-wing politicians, sometimes, liberal politicians. It's white fear, tapping into that white fear, pushing that white fear button. We've all seen it. It gets everyone, woof. I mean, black people protesting, wanting equal rights, equal protections, all of that. Suddenly it's, oh my God, we're all going to lose our jobs because of a diversity hire. And I mean, it works. It works all the time. I mean, except when it doesn't. I mean, thanks to Gen Z, this past midterm election, we narrowly escaped, just getting trounced. So thank you, Gen Z. You rock. You're awesome. Now, what's worth noting is back in the 50s and 60s, when people say it was great then, that was also before there was a labor surplus, right? The definition of late stage capitalism is when we have a labor surplus. So things were good then. If you were a middle class family, a white middle class family, you could raise a family, send them to college, and live a very comfortable life off of just a middle-class income. That's gone away. We all know that. And my personal opinion is that conservatives, lack class consciousness. They don't have capitalism as their boogeyman. So it's like they're just feeling around in the dark, and they just misplace their anger and grab onto culture war nonsense because there's no class consciousness and realization. There's no racial literacy. There's no this. So you can easily, take an economic problem in this country and, misdirect everyone to trans rights, diversity, and all of that. And that's what happens when you don't have any consciousness of, class, dialectical materialism, all that fun theory stuff.
It is past time we put America and Americans first. Joe Biden and his regime are shelling out benefits to illegal immigrants like Oprah Winfrey on her show. Everyone gets a vote. Everyone gets recognized, even if you're here illegally. In New York, aliens are receiving $53 million in free prepaid debit cards. In Denver, Colorado, aliens get 6 free months of housing. And now they want to hand them seats in Congress to buy their lifelong allegiance to the Democrat Party. There are now at least 16.8 million illegal aliens living in the United States, enough to account for roughly 22 seats in the House of Representatives. Including these aliens in the apportionment of congressional districts impacts representation in Congress and undermines the constitutional principle of one person, one vote. Americans deserve to have their voices fully represented, not diluted by illegal aliens.
Thank you kindly, and it's always delightful to hear my friend from Colorado speak. One thing that I do want to point out, however, because there might be some students in the gallery today, is that there can be no illegal aliens and there can be no green card holders in Congress, because the Constitution very clearly specifies that you must have been a citizen for 7 years before you run for the House, and you must have been a citizen for 9 years before you run for the Senate, and you must be a born U.S. citizen in order to run for President of the United States, which some of the historians, as I think I mentioned before, attribute to Thomas Jefferson trying to write Alexander Hamilton out of the presidential sweepstakes. In any event, I think that my colleagues should probably relax with some of the hyperbole and exaggeration here. After all we're saying is let's keep doing what we've done since 1790 in the country. This is the way that the census and the reapportionment have always been run in the United States of America, and what they're proposing is obviously a radical departure from what the Constitution ordains.
Now, of course, you'd think that she would already know all of this, but, you know, we live in a time where you don't need to know anything about anything to be anybody. You know, you can just kind of wing it and become the president of the United States. But just wait, because Louisiana Rep. Garrett Graves, he's about to double down on the MAGA stupidity.
Mr. Speaker, I want to simply explain what we're talking about here. You could have a citizen of Russia that illegally crosses our southern border, pays cartels, comes across our southern border, and decides to set up shop in California. That citizen of Russia that can still vote for Vladimir Putin all day long also is counted in the distribution of electoral votes in the United States, therefore having influence, therefore shaping who is president of the United States. I don't know what else could possibly be foreign interference in elections than what we're talking about today.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I'm delighted to hear someone on that side of the aisle denounce Vladimir Putin, and I thank him for his remarks. We should definitely avoid putting in a president of the United States who looks up to Vladimir Putin and calls him a genius.
We authorize committees here in Congress to ensure that we have proper oversight and accountability in the functioning of the executive branch. And this process is extremely vital because often we see agencies abuse the separation of powers, creating rules and laws, regulations without consent of Congress. And we appropriate funds to agencies like the EPA and expect these tax dollars and this tax dollar funding to be used in accordance with the legislative priorities and comply with the oversight requirements. So, Mr. Regan, last month, the Supreme Court rightly overturned the Chevron doctrine, which the EPA relied on to support its very controversial and costly rulemakings. Since your agency has never been authorized by Congress and has since lost most legal standing, does your agency still plan to enable rogue bureaucrats to enact unconstitutional regulations?
I'm not quite sure I follow you. You're saying that...
I'm saying the Chevron doctrine was overturned by the Supreme Court.
We have no statutory authority?
I'm saying you've never been authorized. Wait, hold on.
Congress doesn't delegate authority for us to do the regulations and the business and the policy. So since 1970...
So the Chevron doctrine, where you have created all of these rules under that have been proven to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court has been overruled. So now I'm asking, are your bureaucrats still going to implement these rulemaking processes?
You do know Chevron is not just focused on EPA. So,
but you are. So I'm asking about the EPA, and I'm asking about your rogue bureaucrats that have enacted these unconstitutional regulations. Are you going to repeal them? Are you going to continue to implement them, or are you going to stop altogether? since it's been overturned.
Do you understand the ruling?
Do you understand the ruling of the Supreme Court?
I do. And so your question is ill-formed. No.
Will you
we're
be
not
repealing?
We're not going to stop.
You're going to unconstitutionally continue with these rulemakings.
We're going to adhere to the Supreme Court and continue to do our...
So which rulemakings are you going to roll back?
We're going to adhere to the Supreme Court and continue to do our work in accordance to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court.
So which ones are you going to repeal?
The Supreme Court didn't tell us to repeal anything.
They have been deemed unconstitutional.
No.
Absolutely, they have. This was a huge victory. And, even in our appropriations bill in the House this year, the funding has been reduced by 20%. I would argue that it needs to be reduced by 100%.
It's not just that Boebert and the likes are clueless about Loper and the Supreme Court ruling pertaining to it. It's clueless that it's about them being clueless about every ruling from the Supreme Court and every policy in this country.
But let me just say this. On the question of agencies in America, let's be clear about what the Supreme Court did. What the Supreme Court said was, of course, the agencies can adopt rules and regulations. My friend from Colorado was really mistaken about that. The agencies, even under their terrible ruling, can continue to adopt and promulgate regulations and rules under the notice and comment process we have. But the Supreme Court then, in this amazing power grab, arrogated to itself the power to determine whether or not an ambiguous or silent statute should be interpreted this way or that. So it was a political power grab by the court. That's all that they did. But Administrator Regan is doing his job. The EPA is doing its job. The NLRB is doing its job. The Department of Justice is doing the job. They've got to adopt rules. The Congress told them to. So that was a power grab by the court against the Congress.
There's been all this talk about the money that you're getting and all this talk about our debt. I just want to remind my colleagues that it is factual. It can be looked up. Under 4 years of the Trump administration, unlike any other administration in the history of this country, they somehow managed to rack up $8 trillion in debt in 4 years. But to be clear, in racking up that debt, it wasn't because they were trying to take care of agencies such as yours that are trying to protect people and make sure that they have clean air, clean water, clean soil. It was so that the rich 1%ers could have their tax cut. And again, Project 2025 is about making sure that those tax cuts that will expire in 2025, that they will get those back again. Again, they don't want to take care of the people, and it's okay to have debt in this country so long as the 1%ers get what they want. I just want to lay that out. Finally, when we look at where this money is going from this administration, Rep. Jordan's district got $500,000. The chair's district got about $1.6 million in EPA grants. Rep. Green's district got $500,000. Rep. Luna's district got $300,000. And Rep. Perry's district got $1 million. So for Republicans that may feel a way about EPA and it allegedly pushing a woke agenda, I just want to know, can we get the money back? I'll yield.
This woman showed up to make a video for Twitter, not to be a legislator for her district. She lives in a district where the EPA has an amazing footprint because it's Colorado and it's so much beautiful land there. Everybody in her district should be absolutely embarrassed. Her old district and the one she's running to represent at this moment. It is absolutely clear that this is not a serious person. Boebert being drugged, not just by her Democratic colleague, but by the person she was trying to troll. The person she was trying to troll has to be the most embarrassing thing I've watched in a while from this one.
One of our colleagues said that the founders never anticipated that you would have huge numbers of people who couldn't vote who are being counted. Of course they did. The vast majority of Americans couldn't vote when the country started.
That's not what my colleague said.
But then I stand corrected. What did he say?
He said the founders never anticipated this volume of illegals.
Okay, well, I will take on...
He didn't say that they... Don't twist my colleague's words.
Fair enough that you're very valiant to rise to his defense. I will answer that misnomer on his part then. If what he said, they never anticipated that number of illegal people, there was no immigration law when the Constitution was adopted at all. In fact, the only illegals in the country at least according to the native population, were the people writing the Constitution.
There was no federal law at all.
Exactly.
And the ranking member knows this. He's being cute.
Jamie Raskin is hammering MAGA clown Clay Higgins about a proposed bill that would reform a census question. But what does this bill do?
H.R. 7109 would then ensure that only citizens are included in the apportionment base by which representation in Congress is allocated. Non-citizens comprise nearly 7% of the total population of the United States. 7%. But non-citizens are not evenly distributed among the states, and some states end up with greater representation in Congress based on a higher concentration of non-citizens. This dilutes the one person, one vote principle for citizens in states with fewer non-citizens.
Jim Comer and the Republicans are hiding behind the guise of fairness in representation to exclude non-citizens from any form of representation at the federal level. The Republican logic goes like this. Since non-citizens can't legally vote, they shouldn't count at all towards the census population data that determines how many federal representatives each state is awarded. Now let's get back to Jamie Raskin shooting down this bogus Republican bill.
So for all of you textualists out there, the plain reading of the text of the Constitution is clear. For all of the constitutional originalists out there, the original purposes have been carefully articulated and never rebutted. For all of you members who like to follow precedent, well, every apportionment in the United States since 1990 has included every single person residing in the United States. The addition of a question about citizenship will deter many immigrants, not only undocumented, but persons with green cards and other forms of lawful status from completing the census. Many non-citizen immigrants who are seeking asylum or are refugees will avoid responding because of uncertainty over their status and fear of arbitrary law enforcement action.
You know, this fear is not unfounded. The hostility is intentional, which is exactly how the Republicans want anyone who isn't a citizen to feel by introducing this bill.
The census is to count every person. The problem is the level of illegal persons that now live within the continental borders of the United States has reached such a point that it thwarts the intended service of our representative republic.
Higgins going mask off on the true intentions of this bill after Comer's tactful introduction is perfect representation of today's Republican Party. Not a lot of politics, just straight hate.
45 million illegals, that's 60 congressional seats. And where do you think those illegals are being drawn to live? In sanctuary states and sanctuary cities, densities of populations, which have advertised and welcomed and brought these illegal citizens there. Why? Why do you think this has been one of the core tenets of agenda of the Democrat Party? Is to thwart the very essence of our representative republic by stacking the deck during the census, whereby apportionment for congressional representation will be permanently shifted to sanctuary states and cities. This is the game plan, man. It's a decades-long agenda to permanently transform this body.
Higgins is just repackaging and sanitizing the white supremacist great replacement theory here.
Apportionment was reflective of American citizens living within the United States. Our representative republic is at risk.
Now let's hear Raskin's rebuttal to this gross display.
The Supreme Court has been very clear about this, and the founders were very clear. There are lots of people who are not voters who get counted in the census. Start with children. Do we think children should not be counted in the census because they're not voters? That makes no sense. Every period of American history, there have been different periods of xenophobia and anti-immigrant fervor towards Germans, towards Irish, towards Mexicans, you name it. Okay, so there's nothing unusual about what we're going through where people want to whip up hysteria about the foreign-born. And in fact, you can find lots of periods in American history where there was a greater percentage of foreign-born people in the country than there are today. And it also stimulated the same kinds of political movements that some of our colleagues identify with. This is a nation that was founded by people who were open to immigration. And Tom Paine said America would become an asylum to humanity, not an insane asylum, but a place of refuge for people fleeing from political and religious and economic oppression, seeking greater opportunity. And that's what America is. So what they want to say is that non-citizens, I don't know where they are on children and other people who can't vote, but they want to say that non-citizens, including lawful non-citizens, permanent residents, green card holders, should not be counted, which creates, as our colleague was saying, tremendous problems for understanding where the population is and how to serve programmatically the population.
Smoke and mirrors. That's a key difference between Higgins's and Raskin's styles. Motivation is another. Higgins and members of his party are motivated by the racism that underlies the bill. They want us to believe that they hold all the cards or rights and can utilize or weaponize them against us as they choose. Raskin's, meantime, he doesn't want to break new ground at all. His argument is simple. It's based on past SCOTUS decisions, case law, and the Constitution.